While stationed in Iraq, Suzanne Swift was coerced into having sex by her chain of command. In the military, this is known as command rape, a subject that, because of its emotional potency and its implications on the military, is very rarely talked about. One such person speaking out is Sara Rich, the mother of Suzanne Swift. I had the opportunity to sit down with Sara and retired Army Colonel Ann Wright this evening to discuss military sexual violence and especially Suzanne Swift's case. Sir, could you explain what your daughter's experience in the military has been like?
Well, you know, my daughter is still in the military, so it's been a long haul. It's been 3.5 years now. One of the first things that happened when she got to Kuwait was her platoon sergeant started propositioning her for sex. And when she decided that, well, she said no and went and told, and nobody helped her. And then she gets to Iraq, and her squad leader starts coercing into a sexual relationship, which is called command rape, when the person who has life or death decision-making over you in a combat zone coerces you into sex. It's like incest.
And this command rape, the idea of command rape, is to help people that weren't in the military understand this. Is there any kind of charge in civilian life that translates to?
Well, it would be like if your supervisor in whatever civilian job you have preyed upon you as a employee. If the boss of the bank and you worked at the bank as a teller in the bank started harassing you or forcing you into sex to keep your job, there are some parallels to it in a way, but I think in the military it's a little more dangerous because your supervisors really control your destiny and your safety.
So she goes along into this, and when it finally ends, he starts punishing her the way she thought he would if she didn't comply or didn't go along with it, and basically made her life a living hell for the rest of her deployment, you know, to the end where she felt suicidal. I didn't know what to do. I called my congressman to get help because I didn't know how to save her or what to do, and I said, you know, he's willing to help. This congressman is willing to help, but you have to sign a Privacy Act waiver. She says, Mom, she says, that would not be good for me to do that. So I backed off and just sent more Rice Krispie treats and anything I could do to keep her spirits up until she got back in February 2005. And then she gets back, and I said, now can we do something about the molester? Because I always called this one person the molester. And she said, no, I have to redeploy with these guys in 18 months, and it's not good for me, for anybody to tell. It's not safe. So she goes back and is an MP at Fort Lewis, and she's in a new unit with a new squad leader, a new team leader. And this guy starts calling her up in the middle of the night, asking her what color underwear she wears, you know. And then one time she went and she says, Sergeant, where do you want me to report in the morning? And he said, in my bed naked. And she had it. You know, she was tired of him harassing her, so she went and told again.
Is there something the military can do to stop this?
Oh, yes. Oh, my God.
What would that be then?
Well, like say at zero tolerance, if anything happens in this unit, the company commander is the first one to go. The first sergeant's the second one to go. The battalion commander. You know, in the military, you put the word out that if this happens, I mean, the heads are going to roll. And have a few heads rolling, and the word will be out. Boy, if we try this, we're going to end up in Leavenworth on this. We're going to get the same punishment for rape in the military as we would have gotten if we had done this as a civilian, which means they go to jail.
They did this investigation and basically told her she was a liar, and this other person was a liar, and she was made to do role plays, you know, to show what you're supposed to do to discourage sexual advances in the military. Whereas the man who was harassing her got a letter of reprimand put in his file and transferred to another unit. And the worst thing of it is then she was seen as a traitor by the rest of her unit because she told on their buddy. And that was really hard for her. So she goes along and continues her work as an MP, and then she tells me she's being redeployed. I said, well, wait, you know, that's not, you're supposed to have 18 months between deployment, you know, for stabilization time. And she said, well, I had to sign a waiver waiving my rights to stabilization time. I'm going, you know. And I said, well, you don't have to, you know. I can work with your congressman again And she says, no, I'm just going to go. So 11 months after her return from her first deployment, she was getting ready to go again. And it was 3 days before she was going to leave. And she had her keys in her hand. Her car was packed. My husband had checked the oil. She was going back to Fort Lewis. And she looked at me in the kitchen and she says, I don't think I can do it. And I go, seriously? She goes, I can't go back. And I said, well, good. Let's get you the hell out of there. So she went AWOL.
And of course, all of this, things that she's going through in Iraq are on top of what...
Being in a combat zone, driving a
Humvee, doing, right?
Driving a Humvee in a combat zone, doing combat patrol.
Did she turn herself in, or what
No.
was the process of her returning to the military?
We were continuing her therapy because she was doing some therapy with this psychologist weekly, and just trying to find a way for her to be strong enough to go back and face what she had to face. And then the military sent a pickup order to the Eugene Police Department. They came to my house. She happened to be there, 10:30 at night on a Sunday night, and they took her away in handcuffs. And up until that moment, we hadn't spoken out about what happened to her in Iraq because it just didn't feel safe. And plus, it's her story, and I'm going to wait for her to say it's okay to talk about it. So the minute they were leading her out, in her pajamas with her handcuffs on, I said, now? And she said, now. And so I got on the phone, and I got onto the computer, and I told everybody that they'd taken my daughter, that she had been AWOL, she'd been sexually abused in the military, and I needed help.
And what happened in her court-martial?
She was sentenced to 30 days in the brig and stripped of all of her rank.
The men who committed this command rape, what happened to them?
One of them is still there in the 54th MP Company. In fact, when they took her back, when the MP people came and took her back to Fort Lewis, they put him as her supervisor, and we had to get an order a no contact order so that she wouldn't have to deal with him because he was very intimidating and scary. And so that was one person who's still in the military, and the other two are not in the military anymore. One of them, the molester, is in Blackwater making $15,000 a month.
And what kind of discharge did they receive?
Honorable.
When she gets out, now what happens to her?
She went into a 2-week outpatient program where they thought she'd be cured. And her last psychiatrist she talked to at Fort Lewis told her it was obvious she didn't want to get better, and good luck at Fort Lee. And they sent her to Fort Lee to do training for a new military occupational specialty.
Is there anything that the military or the government could do to make this right by you as of what happened to your daughter, or more so make it right by your daughter?
Well, I think that window of opportunity has long passed. What they could have done, they could have been the heroes here and said, wow, we are sorry about what happened to your daughter. We are sorry, Suzanne, with what happened to you. And they do acknowledge that they know that something happened. They just couldn't confirm it. There was no hard evidence other than people saying, yes, we knew about it. And they could have released her with an honorable or a medical discharge for her post-traumatic stress disorder, which had been confirmed by 2 different psychologists. They could have been heroes in that. They could have let her go and treated her with honor and dignity. Instead, they drug it out for months and basically tortured our whole family in a way. Emotionally tortured us by holding her hostage is what it felt like. Then putting her in prison, putting her and stripping of her rank. She sat through the entire court-martial, and I was the only person, I was one of the only people in the room. And she was so poised and so quiet. And the only time she cried is when she talked about what the molester had done to her. And she cried really quietly, and I tried not to cry because it was so emotional. But she sat there and explained what he did to her. And I hadn't seen her really cry about it before like that. And it really touched me. And the only thing she asked for clemency about was her rank, because she didn't want the humiliation of having no rank anymore. If she was going to continue to be in the military because they wouldn't release her and let her go, she wanted to maintain her rank. And she wrote this long letter right after her sentence and said, please let me keep my rank, and they didn't.
Stories like Suzanne Swift's are very difficult to hear, but they're even more difficult to tell. That is why Truthout would like to thank Sara Rich for sitting down with us and reliving one of the most painful periods in her life. This has been Jeff Millard reporting for Truthout.org.